Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the playing time is here. That's right, we watched Fantasy Island, The Devil and Mandy Breen on Kill by Kill's TV Terrors. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from Fantasy Island. I sound like the Count. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where normally we talk about horror movie characters in the order which they die in the movie. But on our off weeks, we've been watching singular horror-tinged episodes of normally non-horror related TV series in the hopes that Mr. Rourke's soul's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes we might make at its expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust to make sure all the white people come to my arrival to do the hula. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
This is hard for me. This episode is very, very hard for me.
Now, this is Kill by Kill is a democracy. Despite my desire to make it a theocracy, which I explore a weird religion that deals with me doing every episode in the nude. But we have each suggested at various points in the podcast histories, the movies, or whatever we're covering. And so this particular episode was something that you have been focused on us covering for quite some time. So to hear you say that this was difficult for you is a little surprising to me.
Well, I really, really loved this show when I was a child.
Okay.
This and The Love Boat were appointment television for me, which is odd. Yeah, which was odd because I was like 5 or 6 when these shows premiered. Now I don't know if I was a day one fan, but certainly by this point, this would have been around 1980 that this episode aired.
Yes.
And I definitely know I was watching it by then. And I knew I was watching it by then because I remembered this episode to a certain point. I remembered most of the stuff involving the Roddy McDowall's character, who is the devil.
Yeah. Spoiler alert: Roddy McDowall's the devil, and he is not subtle about it. Gina.
No, and also it would appear that Mr. Rourke is basically supposed to be God at this point. Which is an interesting route for this show to take, because the whole idea of it initially was that this was just some sort of magical island and that he was the caretaker.
Yes.
But then, like, as the show moved on and they were clearly running out of ideas, it became, well, actually it's him doing it. He's doing this.
It's also knowledge that he can pass down if something bad happens to him, which is an element that's confronted in the middle of this hour of television. And I'm like, wait a second. Fantasy Island has a top-down bureaucracy? When did that happen? You mean there's no other steps beyond Mr. Rourke and Tattoo, and then it's just Phil, who is the mechanic of all the weird station wagons they have with picnic tops on top of them instead of real roofs?
And then the hula girls, that's the entire staff.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, it also has a bank, apparently. The First National Bank of Fantasy Island.
Right. What is the coin of the realm of Fantasy Island? Is a real interesting question. The other thing that there were two really troubling elements that I had to confront walking into this episode. Something that I understood culturally. I knew I was going to see Roddy McDowall be the devil, but everything else was a surprise to me. One, that Artie fucking Johnson is in this episode. Now, he is not in the Devil and Mandy Breen section of the episode. And so, to everyone's consternation, I didn't watch any element of that. I'm sorry. I did not watch 1 minute.
It's barely a subplot. I'm not even quite sure I understood what happened, because it is an island where all of your fantasies can come true. And let me tell you, like, I was reading over like the episode guide to this, and boy, people came up with like the most boring fantasies. Like, I want to be a cowboy. Right. Like, what are you, 8? You know, like, who fantasizes as an adult about being a cowboy? Or, you know, I want to run a bar during World War II. Sure, I guess.
I mean, I watched Casablanca too, but is that a fantasy?
I want, a mansion and a yacht like Elmer J. Fudd, I mean, but so like this character, Artie Johnson, he wants to be a millionaire, but I guess because Tattoo is kind of running his own little thing on the side, but he has to use a magic lamp, which I'm not quite sure I understood what was happening there.
Is he supposed to be learning a lesson? Is like, it seems like Mr. Rourke is like, hey, you went, I rejected his fantasy and then you brought him here. Now you have to do this. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, how hard can it be? Again, you don't have to physically give the guy $1 million fucking dollars. Do they have a horse racing facility on Fantasy Island?
Yeah, the way the island looks seems to change depending on the plot. Sometimes you think it's like Hawaii, which is what I always assumed it was when I was a kid, and then it's just like downtown Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's Hawaii with a heavy dose of Altadena, California.
Yeah, I forgot about the whole like, oh, your fantasy can't involve you being actually given money, which it's like, oh, okay, but Mr. Rourke, you realize that is actually most people's fantasy,
right? The other thing is like, it's a fantasy. He doesn't walk away from Fantasy Island with $1 million.
He just gets to live like a millionaire.
He lives like a millionaire. It seems it's fucking ridiculous. Whereas in the middle of this episode, for an interminable 7 minutes, we are treated to this comedy section where a guy's like, thank you very much for allowing me to be Errol Flynn in this pirate movie. And it's like, he didn't reject that because he's not going to walk away from this being a fucking pirate. That's his fantasy. He flies home and he tells everyone in the insurance office, Mr. O'Rourke turned me into a fucking pirate. And the Blackbeard was very short. And then Hervé Villechaize walks on with water in his hat, looking like I need a drink. This is the way it looks.
He's tormented.
Truly. Why does Tattoo, like, Tattoo's an employee, why does he have to be like a part of these fantasies? I truly don't know.
He's like his assistant or something.
He's an assistant, which makes it really weird that he's that involved in like the pirate fantasy or Artie Johnson wanting to be a millionaire. We're talking a lot about this Artie Johnson section, of which I skimmed through on fast forward. The idea that he's like, you can't do this fantasy, and a good 2/3 of his fantasy involved being trapped in a warehouse as a millionaire.
Well, the whole point, and I think this is if I recall, this is a running theme in Fantasy Island, is that you've got yourself a monkey's paw sitch, where your fantasy isn't all it's cracked up to be. It's like, okay, so people are giving you money to be taught a morals lesson, Mr. Rourke. Right. Just take their money and give them I want 2 girls at once fantasy. I mean, come on.
Whereas when they arrive, once Artie Johnson is carted off to one section to sip a tiki drink from a coconut, and you look at all the white ass Polynesian dancers that have been employed here.
Yeah, there's a lot of blondes there. A lot of blondes.
Yeah, it's a lot of sandy blondes in grass skirts. And you're like, what the fuck is happening here? They had to have had some Polynesians on the speed dial. This is a regular gig. This scene happens every episode, but apparently this was the whitest day of Central Casting's incredibly white lineage. So once Artie Johnson fucks off, we're left with Carol Lindley as Mandy Breen, a woman who has spent the last 2 years carrying, or actually a year. It's wiggy. I feel like it changes halfway through the episode. Anyway, she's spent the last period of time in her life caring for her husband after a near fatal accident. And she's come to Fantasy Island to, quote, save her own life, but won't tell Mr. Rourke and his toupee the rest of the story.
Oh, he's pissed too. He's just like, fuck you for lying to me.
How dare you? Well, that is the thing. I mean, if you don't know it's magic, right, this would take some doing. But really, it takes very little to make a fantasy happen if it's just magic. It's just like arranging for magic to happen, which it never really gets into the gritty details of how that occurs. But because Mandy won't give up the goods, Ricardo Montalban is steaming through that toupee, which appears to be a converted motorcycle helmet.
Yeah, there's some pretty outstanding hairpiece work in this episode.
It is truly wild on multiple facets. I mean, Artie Johnson has a comb over that starts in one ear and maybe reaches the other. It's a lot.
You got him. You've got the two thugs, one of whom is played by Joe Turkel, who will be better known to horror fans as the bartender Lloyd from The Shining, and Eldon Terrell from one of my personal favorite movies, Blade Runner.
Right. Yes. Whereas the other guy is Ross Martin, who's most famous for like being in a dozen TV Westerns. And he's in a semi-okay episode of Columbo. I know him from Columbo. And that's pretty much it.
I'm pretty sure there's probably been a huge overlap of Fantasy Island guest stars with Columbo guest stars.
Oh yeah, 100% for sure. And Carol Lindley, who tattoos like Hachi Machi. I can't believe this hotsy lady. And I'm kind of like, I don't see it. I mean, she's a TV blonde for the 70s.
She looks very surprised all of the time.
Yeah.
When she doesn't look surprised, she looks confused.
Yes. She was in the Poseidon Adventure. Good for her. I don't remember who she is in the Poseidon Adventure.
Isn't she? She's Ernest Borgnine's wife. No, that was Stella Stevens, wasn't it?
That's Stella Stevens.
Who was she in that? I do recall her being in it, but you're right that I don't remember who she played.
Nani Perry is the character name.
Was she the singer?
Maybe.
I think she was the lounge singer, the one who's in the hot pants.
Oh. Well, she looks great in Poseidon Adventure. Here, the costuming is not doing her any favors. I mean, she's been really made up to be dowdy.
Yeah, I think she's supposed to be looking like a kind of boring suburban housewife. So it's supposed to be like shocking that she would think to sell her soul to the devil. Right. Which I have questions.
We'll get to it, because let's introduce the devil and then let's really dig into this deal, because the reason it happens is fascinating, but I don't want to overstep the devil's introduction here, because once Mr. O'Rourke drops her off at this cliff's edge, which is actually above Malibu, enter Roddy McDowall, who is dressed like he's just come off a touring regional company of Guys and Dolls.
Yeah, that collar is buttoned all the way up.
Yes, it's a black suit, white tie, which is interesting for a devil. It's more like someone who should be playing craps in an alley with a silly hat on. It doesn't read Satan, let's put it that way. And he's like, hey, you made a deal with me. You need to pay up. And Carol Lindley's response to this is, I haven't very much money. Oh, you haven't, have you? Who wrote this? Is this a first fucking draft? I haven't very much money, is what a character said on television.
But yeah, so her husband is in a near fatal car accident. And now, okay, I know you're not a religious person anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But if God forbid something happened to Becky and she was clinging to life.
Right.
Would you bypass God completely and go directly to Old Scratch and
Right.
offering your soul in exchange to save Becky's life?
I feel like there's more avenues to get in touch with God. Just as in terms of a convenience thing, it's the difference between an ATM and a loan shark. I know where all the ATMs are. I wouldn't know where to begin to find a fucking loan shark.
Well, she makes it seem like that he just kind of shows up in this hospital room.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, does the devil not have anything better to do than pick on sad women who are crying over their injured husbands? And he's like, well, I'll tell you what, I'll save his life, but you got to sell your soul and I'm going to collect it in 1 year. She's like, yep, that sounds good.
Yeah, do it. Into it seems like a completely rational idea. But of course, that year is nearly up. And so to get out of this deal Mandy has made with this Looney Tunes gangster, I mean, the devil, he tasks her with finding a rare Queen Omega orchid, potted, not cut, and bring it to him by the following midnight, or she's burning in hell, baby. And we know this because every time Roddy McDowall is seen on screen, he is smoking from his ass. I'm not shitting you. Every scene he appears in, smoke is emanating from his ass.
Yeah, and another thing I thought was strange. Now, I don't really profess to understand the workings of the selling one soul to the devil process.
Sure.
But I have read a fair amount of literature, if you want to call it that, and seen movies on it. I thought that was something that the devil came to collect your soul when you die. I did not think it was something that he just shows up a year later like a bill collector, and shakes you down for your soul. I thought it was, you die and you just go directly to hell.
Yeah, that's typically how it happens. But he has made a very specific bargain with Mandy over her injured husband from a car accident. It could not be more mundane if you tried. So Mandy then passes off this responsibility off to Mr. Rourke, who's kind of pissed that she's essentially riffing on her fantasy and he's just supposed to yes and a blooming flower out of seasons. And I guess as revenge, Mr. O'Rourke invites Mandy's husband into this picture. And that is when I was given my next surprise. When Mandy's husband is revealed to be a not always limping with the same leg Adam West.
Yeah, I mean, for someone who was hanging on by a thread like less than a year prior, he looks great. He's doing fine.
Well, I think he needs some eye work done is by the looks of it. Or Adam was having a particularly rough go of it right before filming close-ups because he looks hollowed out. He looks very tan, but it's not making up for how dark those circles are from underneath his eyes. And of course, this is 70s TV. And so they're giving him the lightest of pancake makeups because who's watching this in high definition? Us in 2023. And so he, holy Moses, talking about another person who is covering up a lot of the top of his head. He is reaching from the back and it is making a northern push, but starting from the left flank and then going decidedly right. And it's shellacked. He's really compensating for it a lot. Adam West is in this particular episode.
It's just funny to me how Mr. Rourke is he's pissed that she has changed her mind about what she wants her fantasy to be. And it's like, dude, she probably already paid her money. What do you care?
Right. I don't know enough about Fantasy Island's finances, I guess. And why should I? But when it presents these things like, we don't have $1 million, you're changing your fantasy midstream, when she didn't really elucidate what her actual fantasy is, it's kind of like, I don't know, roll with the goddamn punches, my guy.
It's like, you know, it's like she's just like, he's like, what do you mean you want a plant? It's like, just get the woman her fucking plant, man. You're not paying.
I mean, and the thing is, he totally comes around to it. He's like really pissed for the first 2.5 minutes. And then finally he introduced Adam West into this, like, well, you're going to have to suffer with this asshole on your arm for the rest of this trip. So I guess I will lessen it somewhat and fetch you this very rare flower in this very specific manner.
I love the gold foil on the pot, so like FTD just showed up with to drop off the plant at Fantasy Island. They just rode in on their kayak.
So yeah, later on a soundstage in Culver City, but it looks like a tropical isle. Mandy is presented with her flower, and Adam West is wearing what could only be described as banana-based camouflage as a shirt. It just looks like a bruised banana in polyester. It's wild that this was a costume. Like, this is a tropical shirt for this luau, and it just looks like a banana that you probably should have thrown out, but you're like, I'm going to put this in a smoothie as a shirt. But the mood decidedly changes when we cut to the smoking posterior of Roddy McDowall.
He's also backlit too, which I think is hilarious. So he's
underlit.
He's like partially in shadow, but not exactly at the same time.
Well, to evoke something you said in the Skinamarink episode, he looks a lot like the Daffy Duck villains from that gangster cartoon.
You say he looks like Neon Noodle?
Yeah, very much so. And so Mandy's like, I have to leave you, honey. Satan and I have a previous engagement. And listen, I would like to think of myself as a very understanding spouse, but there's only so many times you can be told, I will explain my rash and weird behavior later, before I stop saying, sure, I'll just be here in this shirt that was rejected by Dan Flashes. It's so weird. So she fucks off with this flower over to Roddy McDowall. And I'm no, devil's advocate or a satanic legal scholar or whatever, but I don't think Buffy the Beelzebub here is playing by the rules, because when she hands him the flower, it just wilts via stop motion.
I love that. That's like my favorite part of the whole episode. Because you're supposed to be like, what?
How is that possible? What special effects is this?
What sort of black magic makes this happen?
God, did they hire a wizard and bring him over to the Sony lot? This is incredible. Oh my God. He was the Columbia lot at the time, actually. I should be cognizant of this thing that only I care about. But he's like, well, anything living that I touch just withers and dies. So you pony up the soul. And this is when Mr. O'Rourke enters the scene. He's like, you should have told me you had a pact with Satan.
There's a line you don't hear every day.
I mean, the laugh I uttered when I heard her say, Mr. O'Rourke is right, I entered a pact with Satan, I had to pause because I was laughing for a solid 5 minutes.
This is what we're not emphasizing here. We've left out an important detail about this show, is that as cheesy as it is to watch through a modern lens, and one of the reasons why I thought this would be a good fit for this new side thing we're doing is this part is meant to be taken very seriously. Like everybody, the Artie Johnson one, because that's usually how the show is structured. You had the A plot, which was more often than not kind of serious, and like I said, sort of took like a monkey's paw approach to things. And then you've got the B plot, which is more lighthearted and slapsticky. That was usually the one to like Tattoo getting involved in shenanigans with somebody or whatever. But yeah, this is everybody is deadly serious in this in this part of the episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and unfortunately, it does not play well because you just have multiple scenes where neither of these two actors who are playing a married couple can look at one another.
Oh my god! And there's and like towards they are so, yet they're supposed to be so madly in love with each other that they would rather die together than try to figure out this situation. But they have you're right, they don't even look at each other. It's like they might as well be brother and sister.
And this is where I was going, oh, is there an interesting plot here where Adam West actually got into this accident to make his wife pledge her soul to Satan because he had previously pledged his soul to Satan. And that does not play.
No,
not the resolution of this.
Well, also this is, and I suspect this is something that as we continue TV terrors, should we go long on it, and I hope we do. We're having a lot of fun with it, but certainly 70s horror on television was very, very limited in how much it could show. Mm-hmm. And we're still in the era. This was 1980. So we're still in the era of a lot of demonic possession movies and movies involving the devil. And, a lot of them were quite, terrifying in their depiction. You've got, of course, The Exorcist. You've got the Omen movies. You've got, to a certain extent, the Amityville Horror. And then you've got this TV show, which they want desperately for the audience to be scared by this character. They want to find him. They want to find him very scary. There is a scene when he confronts them at the end, where they are supposed to be haunted by demons. I guess those things are supposed to be.
We will get to that. No. I'm going to break that all down.
It is so silly and so like. Watered down to the point where you could easily have a child watch this and
yes,
they would think nothing of it.
No, there's zero horrifying about it. And I in my own mind at this point, I'm like, what is the hook here? Because you're talking about like one of the biggest, fanciful, demonic, evil figures of all time. Like, where are we going with this? And Mr. O'Rourke's kind of like, you see, Satan himself cannot book a vacation here on Fantasy Island. He has always wanted my soul. And so what this really is about is me. And so I will step in your place. And it kind of leaves us on this cliffhanger of, is the chain of command at Fantasy Island seeming shaky? Who will play Blackbeard if Tattoo has to take over? National Enquirer readers want to know. And meanwhile, it's acted as if this is the worst Pinter play of all time because no one can speed this shit along. It's almost as if the guy who was the screenwriter here was like, told by the producer, Walter, you've turned in a 15-minute script for 25 minutes worth of screen time. And he's like, well, have everyone talk slower. Anyways, I'm off to buy a car for a secretary I knocked up. Bye. All the tension is lost by the fact that no one can fucking fill up the gaps in the episode. And so, finally, when O'Rourke is like, hey, Mr. Devil, you're not cool. It's supposed to be taken as like, well, finally, someone is taking it to the man. That devil is finally going to hear it from a responsible party.
Right. And then there's like a scene where Mr. Rourke is this very like far away look at his eyes, and he's like, "This is not the first time I have faced the devil in combat." And it's like, right, and is this motherfucker trying to say he's God?
Also, it's that faraway look where you're expecting a Quint, this is what happened to me in the ocean during World War II monologue. And he doesn't deliver any of that. It's just kind of like, me and the devil, we go back. Listen, his travel agent is always trying to get him on this island, and I say no, and he's really pissed about it. And
it's like, this is definitely something where like Tattoo just kind of looks at him, and it's like, no, you need to. This is something you want to pursue. This is a conversation you want to keep going in some way or another.
Yeah, and he's like, if something bad happens to me, here are the keys to the big Jeep.
But the code of my safe is 1 2 3 4 5.
This is 99999. So they go out to yet another soundstage in Culver City, which looks like not even George of the Jungle would take this as an actual rainforest. And Mr. Rourke is like, I will be their advocate, and he's like, well, this isn't really a court of law. And he's like, I think I can beat you. And then Mandy and Adam West start backing up, and I'm like, aha, okay, here's the deal. They both made a deal with the devil that instead of taking their soul, he'll take Mr. O'Rourke. It's a setup. Like, what tricks is this dastardly duo playing on Fantasy Island? Can Mr. O'Rourke outfox a fox in the hen house? Will Robin unshackle himself from the Joker's big bomb? Find out. But none of that fucking happens. What we get instead is a cavalcade of children's craft projects as scary demons superimposed on camera that Adam West is supposedly frightened by. And by frightened by, I mean his face kind of moves.
He's mildly puzzled. Whereas Carol Lindley is like, oh. With like, you've got this like kind of bear thing, and then like kind of pig thing. And then like some unidentifiable creature.
Yeah, this is an audio medium after all. And God knows, I don't think everyone's going to take the time to go to Tubi to watch this particular episode. So I did the research. I'm going to tell you what each of these quote unquote demons looks like. Bachelor number 1 has 4 horns and no waiting. He also appears to lack an upper lip, as if God laughs at his physical form. It's not scary, but very pointy. Bachelor number 2, though, appears to be a lowland ape skull that has been dropped in blue nacho cheese. Bachelor number 3 is a rotting felt bear head.
That's my favorite one.
Large cherry Skittles as eyes that appear first, and then the rest of him comes up. I think this is an Amityville horror riff is what's going on like. But I don't know. His mouth also looks like it wants to give you a big old kiss.
That's my favorite one.
Oh, I can totally see why. Because after him, everyone is filmed with a zero confidence look. Everything becomes flashback wavy. Like they're like, oh, that's not ready for prime time. Bachelor number 4 was a demon head, but mom backed over it in the driveway because you didn't pick it up after being called in for dinner. And then Bachelor number 5 is a scroll, maybe, or like a bad Dr. Michael Morbius that melted in the sun, something like that.
Yeah, these things. It reminded me of Knight Rider with the
yes,
my goblin son showing up in the mirror. Say kind of very similar, the similar effect, but perhaps even sillier here.
Yes, your goblin son is again A ghoulie that's going to college as opposed to these community college dropouts that show up here. Meanwhile, back at the fierce battle of wills of good and evil, I'll be honest with you, Gina. I think there were better philosophical debates in The Visitor than we see in this particular episode.
Honestly, I think I would agree with you.
Love is temptation. Love is a creative energy of the universe. Love is two naked children making each other breakfast on your grandmother's coffee mug. It's a lot of things. And then out of fucking nowhere, Mr. Rourke pulls a 3-point shot from half court, and he uses the Dream Child defense. That's right. He sets it up that if Satan wins, he can only win by taking the exact number of the souls that he requests, which is 3. Rourke's, Mandy, Adam West. And Rourke's like, booyah chaka. Mandy's pregos. So there's actually 4. Don't get me started on those politics, but whatevs.
Well, if we know anything, we know the devil always plays fair and square.
That's right. But this is Roddy McDowall's turn to act angry. And he does this by slowly turning around.
Oh my God, this scene. And again, it's actually almost kind of charming and a little sad that they honestly thought that this was going to be terrifying.
Yes. Because what is he going to do when he turns back around? And the answer is fuck all.
No. He put on 2 teeny tiny little horns.
Oh, that's true.
And he now has Spock ears.
Spock ears and 1 suspicious widow's peak on Roddy, which again transforms him into the Count from Sesame Street.
It's like it's like he's revealing I'm actually the devil. But but yeah. We knew this already. So it's not all that shocking of a reveal.
Yeah, it's like you've been telling us you're the devil since you've shown up, and everyone else has referred to you as the devil. So it's not a big reveal that you're more red than you were previously.
He honestly makes the Mark McKinney devil from Kids in the Hall seem cool.
It's true. Hey, now that would be if he turned into the Mark McKinney devil, and he's like, "Oh, you got me again, Rourke."
With the leather vest and all.
Yeah. Maybe I'll come back here, kind of hit up some of your Polynesian dancers because they seemed into it. Strange how I can slip into Mark McKinney devil very fast. Wow, that really held cachet in my brain. So he fucks off. And they're like, well, it's crazy that you had to lie. And he's like, oh, Mandy, I think you should visit the doctor when you return to Philadelphia.
Because I'm basically God, and I knew this before you did.
Yeah, it's a real guess on his part.
No, I'm telling you, Patrick, I think that the show is implying that he is a sort of omnipotent being. And that he just like he knew that she was lying about something when she comes into his office and asks about the plan. I think the show at this point is heavily implied that he is supposed to be the good Lord.
Man, good gravy. Would you believe in God more if it was Ricardo Montalban?
I mean, maybe he seems like a genial enough fellow.
Sure. Yeah. No. Would I like to hang out with Ricardo Montalban? Of course I would. Can you imagine the fucking stories that dude has? Like, he has to be a good hang wherever he is now. I would love to just sit back and let him talk forever. But I don't know that I want to go to church and worship him necessarily. And I also don't think God needs a toupee. That's the other big one.
No, God should be able to grow his own hair.
Yes, very much so. The devil, not so much, but I do think that, as Mark McKinney's character notes, he should be partially bald. But I do think that God should have a full and rigorous head of hair,
just flowing locks, like Franco Nero in The Visitor.
Exactly. Like, again, I would go to a church to worship Franco Nero from The Visitor.
Just only from The Visitor, though.
No, any other thing? No, thank you. From The Visitor, that makes sense. That religion where you gather a bunch of bald children to listen to you yippity yap all damn day, that is how God should be represented. Or Gerd, I'm not really sure. They can't say Satan because that's, of course, copywritten. So that's Satine for some reason. Holy shit, The Visitor is a weird ass movie, Gina.
I know. I just wrote about it on my newsletter. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since we watched it 6 years ago.
It really does stick with you. I mean, there are very few films that portray the battle between good and evil as a Pong game between a 12-year-old and an old man who's obviously been hitting the whiskey right before the shoot. So what are you going to do, man? Everyone gathers for one last hula. And before they get on that plane, he's like, well, enjoy having a baby. And sure, what better parents than a man with no taste in shirts, barely clinging to life, and a woman who sold her soul to the devil to keep him alive for a year. They're great planners. This is going to work out fantastic. That child is going to be raised in a great home, Gina.
That child, at 20 years from now, that child is going to show up at Fantasy Island and say, I wish I had good parents.
My fantasy is that my parents didn't exist anymore because I have problems with the way I was raised. Anything we're missing? Any R.D. Johnson artifacts you want to bring up from the part of the show I did not watch?
The R.D. Johnson part of the episode, like I said, it's only interesting to see, oh, hey, it's the guy from The Shining. Yeah. But like that, it barely qualifies as a subplot. Like you have this female character who's working for the thugs. And then initially it seems like she's faking wanting to date R.D. Johnson, but then like the very next scene, suddenly they've hit it off and now she doesn't want to be involved in it anymore. And it's just like, yeah, you needed to fill like 15 minutes of this show, didn't you?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And then at the end, it's revealed that she's an undercover cop. And you're like, on Fantasy Island?
Yeah, and again, like it's like, okay, is this like a vacation place, like a resort, or is this or is this like an entire like functioning like city and town? Yeah.
What is the infrastructure of Fantasy Island? Because the way it's introduced is it's like it's in the middle of nowhere, and what happens is by magic, and that's fine. That's the setup, right? You told me what that is, and then very late in the game, it's like, this undercover cop who just happens to be here. Did you hire the undercover cop to come? Like, what? Does she work for Fantasy Island PD? What?
Yeah, is there like a mayor of Fantasy Island? Because I would have assumed that was Mr. Rourke.
Yes, I would very much assume that it's Mr. Rourke, but maybe this is a Disney World, Reedy Creek sort of situation where the infrastructure is handled by a ad hoc extension of the business, but it's not, but it's actually a government entity. Again, it makes more sense to me that they have a Santa Anita on Fantasy Island than they just randomly have an undercover cop who's part of somebody else's fantasy. And then it's like, all these times we had in this car in this warehouse, I fell in love with R.D. Johnson. Get the fuck out of here. You fell in love with R.D. Johnson by hanging out with him in a warehouse on Fantasy Island. You didn't even see a waterfall together?
That's not that doesn't even qualify as a meet cute.
No, that's a meet the anti-cute is what that is. There's no level of cute to what they're meeting. It's no, fuck that. So that pretty much does it. I mean, we can't play Choose Your Own Death Venture because nobody actually dies.
He just sends the devil back to hell.
Sends the devil back to hell. But I guess what we can choose is our own fantasy venture, which is of the two fantasies presented here, which one would you choose and why? Would you choose to be an instant millionaire, but look like Artie Johnson?
Ooh.
Or would you come to Fantasy Island to get yourself out of a satanic pact to keep your husband alive?
I mean, am I guaranteed that Mr. Rourke will, do some do mind reading shit and be able to, finagle the devil out of the deal? That
is the information source that we have. And so we must conclude that is what will happen.
Well, yeah, obviously I would take that one then. I mean, since you can't take the money with you.
Right.
If you fancy about being a millionaire,
but you found love with a nice undercover police lady who works for Fantasy Island PD. Who knows what kind of benefits package?
But I look like Artie Johnson.
Yeah. Does he have the kind of glasses that can burn ants if you hold them up to the sun just right?
I mean, I just call them like the serial killer glasses. They're like Jeffrey Dahmer special.
I mean, those, yes. He looks like, that's too long of a story. But yes, I met a maybe serial killer once, and he had glasses like that.
I thought you were gonna say I bet Jeffrey Dahmer was. I was like, wait, no, you're gonna tell me this story right now.
No, I met a guy who insinuated over dinner that he paid for that he possibly may have been a serial killer. And my response to that was, well, you're the only one who's put that forward as an idea. So, like, are you? And he very coyly did not answer that question. And that's one of those things, Gina, that if you at any point posit the idea, I might be a serial killer, and I ask you, but yeah, yes or no, are you? You better have an answer to that fucking question.
So do you
you know what I mean?
Do you read the paper every day expecting to see him in there?
Listen, I never went back to that theater in Palm Springs ever again. I think the Italian restaurant we went to was bulldozed and replaced with different things. So there's not a lot of evidence of what this happened, but it is an insanely long story. But yes, Becky and I may have gone to dinner with a serial killer.
And that serial killer was Richard Ramirez.
If he was, Richard had seen better days. So, yeah, that's a story for another day. But that pretty much ramps it up here at Kill by Kill. But Gina, where can people find you on these here internets?
I write about movies and television at thespool.net. I also have a Substack in which I've been having a lot of fun. I have written recently, as of this recording, about Megan. I revisited The Visitor, which is one of my favorite episodes we've ever done. I re-listened to that one a lot because it just makes me laugh. I also, by this point, will have written about Cocaine Bear and The Outwaters, which I highly, highly recommend, and hopefully we'll get around to covering that here because boy, is that gruesome. And I am on Twitter under Gina Does Things.
Do it today. People, check it out. Josh Hollis does all of our artwork. Revenge Body at Revenge Body Memphis at bandcamp.com for our music. Find us on the socials. Come to our Patreon where we're doing fun things. We talked about Hot Fuzz earlier in the month. And of course, in just a week's time, we'll be discussing As the Film Plays, Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, a film we spent more than 2 months trying to make sense of, and it nearly drove us insane. So there we go. Next week, we'll be back with more fun stuff. We think we'll be talking about Megan. I always hesitate to prognosticate what we'll be talking about. unless we've already recorded it. Because the last time I did that, it turned out to be Predator, and we had all sorts of problems. But I don't think
we got it. We nailed it eventually, and it was a great episode, though.
Yes. So, and scheduled is Megan next week. So if you haven't watched it, now's your opportunity to see it on Peacock, and watch some episodes of Poker Face while you're there, which is very entertaining. That just about does it. But don't worry, folks. The body count will continue for myself and for Gina. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.